DC Multiverse!
How's it going, super friends? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at 3 of McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse action figures, including the Dark Knight Returns battle-damaged Batman, the Dawn of DC Red Hood, and the new 52 Huntress action figure. Each one of these figures comes with their own accessories and various items, including a trading card for each figure and an action figure stand, as well as personalized accessory for each character. Red Hood comes with a pair of extra trigger finger hands for holding his crowbar and his katana. Batman comes with an extra head sculpt for a total of 2 head sculpts, as well as grabby hands and punchy fists, and a bat rope. And as well as that, instead of coming with a trading card holder, he comes with a street lamp, while the Huntress comes with her crossbow, 2 face plates on top of the one that comes on the body, and 2 more sets of hands, punchy fists and open hands. All of these figures look pretty cool, but let's take a look at them all individually, starting with the Batman. So right off the bat, you'll notice that this body has been used before on the original release of the Dark Knight Returns Batman, and you'll have to forgive me, that's actually a different head that I've swapped onto the body. I've actually put the original head sculpt on this Mattel Batman, and also here for the Jokerized version of this Batman. But unlike its original counterpart here, this version of Batman has not actually been molded in a gray color plastic, but rather was molded in black and then painted gray. So if you're thinking of using acetone or some kind of paint remover to remove these scuffs, these tears in Batman's costume, then you can't. Well, you probably can on the knee. The knee looks like it's actually molded in gray plastic. And same thing for the bat on Batman's chest. That's actually molded in black plastic, so you can use paint remover to remove the scuffing and the ripping from the bat emblem. So if you don't like the rips on this Batman's costume, you're pretty much just gonna have to deal with them. Unless, of course, that is you perform total swaps of the gauntlets, the trunks, the cape, and the boots by heating up the blue parts and actually putting them on an original body like this one. Also, all of the rips and tears are comic accurate. This Batman is actually based off of one of the covers for The Dark Knight Returns. It is the same cover that is on this trading card, and also the same one that's on the back of the box. While we're at it, here's the back of the trading card, and feel free to pause to read this if you'd like to. The color scheme for this guy is actually really bright. He has an incredibly bright yellow belt, and the blue really stands out on this guy a lot. And I gotta tell you, I really do like this Batman's bat-cowled head sculpt a lot. It's actually different than the original one. The original one actually shows a lot more teeth, while the newer one is a lot more subdued. And it is a nice touch that they've added all that shadowing around his eyes and on his forehead. There's also a lighter blue wash on the top of the cowl, as well as on the front of the cape here. Also, here's a close-up shot of the Bruce Wayne head sculpt that came with this Batman figure. It's not too bad, actually. On top of the hands I've already mentioned, he also comes with an open-fingered hand and a batarang fingered hand, where he has the batarangs in between his knuckles and thumb. And yes, this is just the same old bat rope as before. And here he is between Carrie Kelly Robin and a custom DC Multiverse Superman that I put together. It just uses the mullet head Superman body, and I put a DC Direct HUD on top. The reason why I chose this Superman is because his blue is lighter than Batman's. And just for funsies, let's switch out Carrie Kelly for the Mattel scale Batman. Because we've seen this Batman released 2 previous times, I'm actually going to skip his articulation and move over directly to the Red Hood, who actually, from this point of view, looks really, really good. Now, the first time I remember seeing this Jason Todd Red Hood suit was actually in Red Hood and the Outlaws issue number 26. And this figure actually follows along pretty close with the original source material that it was based off of. As you can see, it's a very large departure from any kind of classic looking Red Hood that we've ever seen, with his suit in the past being either black with a brown jacket or gray with a brown jacket. And just for funsies, I'm going to bring in the Arkham Universe Red Hood as a comparison. and the Gotham Knights Red Hood on the other side for comparison, based off of the not so much of a hit video game. We can see that even though these two Red Hood figures are largely different than each other, they're even more drastically different than this new Red Hood redesign. And that even this Red Hood from the Three Jokers is more like a classic Red Hood design. Being that they all are wearing an actual helmet, most of them have a leather jacket, and the one here from Arkham Knights that doesn't have a leather jacket has a brown leather vest that kind of matches this more old school type Red Hood. We can see that this new Red Hood is actually a complete departure from pretty much anything that we've seen before. Having, as we can see here, traded in his previous full head covering Red Hood mask for a simple nose and mouth cover with a domino mask. And yes, if anyone's wondering, he does actually have hair, although the imprint of the fabric of his hood is in the sides of his head, but they did for the most part actually sculpt hair on top of this facial sculpt. And you can see the straps going around the side of his head to hold his little face mask on. But as we can see, that's not the only thing that's different. Literally, everything is pretty much different. The symbol right here on his chest is actually different, and it's a sleeveless hooded jacket that he's wearing now that is red and black. And oh, look at this. He's also got a spot to stow his weapons, which we'll get to in a second. The jacket is over top of some form of t-shirt, and Jason appears to have opted for crude bindings on his forearms now, rather than any kind of actual armor. His boots look pretty good. 3 giant buckles. He's got treads down here on the bottom. He's got his cargo pants. Not really sure I'd call them cargo pants. Combat pants. Whatever these are. They're tactical pants. Yes, let's call them tactical pants with pockets in the front. I will say the belt area is kind of weird because his pants go up really, really high. I may or may not end up taking the pants off and cutting that plastic so that it, you know, that's just weird that it's like, that's strange, right? Like, why is it so high above his belt? Like, when you look at the image on the front of the trading card, I mean, we don't see that. P.S. Bio on the back. Feel free to pause to read that if you'd like to. But at any rate, still a very cool figure and very accurate to the original source material. Here's a close-up look at his katana, or wakizashi, as I believe this one's actually called because it's shorter. And here's a look at his crowbar. This ain't nothing that we haven't seen before. And as previously mentioned, both of these can be stowed in these little slots on his back here, like this. Just gotta push them in. There you go. They fit. And they look kind of cool poking out over his shoulders. Okay, and with that out of the way, there's only one last thing to do, and that is check his articulation. I'm not even gonna bother with the head, just because I think that most of you won't really care to pull his hood back like I did and check his articulation. I mean, I guess some of you might, but it's on a ball peg. It's pretty self-explanatory what it's going to do. We have the rounded hinges up here. We have the bicep swivel. We have the double jointed elbows. Those crunch up a little bit more than I thought they were going to. That's really nice. We have articulation in the torso here. You can see the little cut right there, and it's actually fairly good. When you combine that with the waist, it does a fairly good amount of swivelly moving articulation back and forward, left and right. Looks like he's ready to go to the gym. And then down here we have the, what I like to call the typical McFarlane groin articulation with the little ratchets down there, and you know, it's pretty good. What does he have as far as, oh, yep, terrible. But he doesn't really need that, because this Red Hood, because there is a motorbike for him, he actually comes with a complete thigh cut. That is very cool. He's got double jointed knees that crunch up enough. He's got a rounded hinge down here in the ankles that's also a pivot, and toe articulation. Not too shabby. Now we will move on to the new 52 version of the Huntress. This is not the Helena Bertinelli version of Huntress, but this is actually the Helena Wayne version of the Huntress from New 52, Earth 2. So she used to hang out with this version of Power Girl, and technically her closest counterpart on Earth 1 from New 52 would be Damian Wayne Robin, as they are both children of Bruce Wayne. Now this Huntress actually shares a considerable amount of body parts with the Arkham City version of Catwoman that McFarlane produced. The entirety of the legs, that being the boots, and right up to the thighs, as well as the arms in their entirety, are shared pieces from this Catwoman. So those of you with a keen eye will know that she never wore boots like this in the New 52, and she's actually supposed to have knee pads. But rather, she should look a little bit more like this Huntress right here from the New 52, made by DC Collectibles. You'll see that she has the knee pads, the correct boots, and the correct gloves with the elbow pads. That's more like what she should look like. I also like the fact that this Huntress comes with a cloth goods cape, which is really, really handy considering she has this big chunky hair right here that definitely, I mean, it's challenging, right? It's gonna get in the way. You'll find this out when we do the articulation segment, but she's got a piece that sits on her shoulder right here, and it's pretty flat to the shoulder. So if there was a plastic cape here, that would totally get in the way a lot more. It's not very wide. It is a very narrow cape, but it's at least accurate. It's black, it's got the white outlines. It's not wired on the bottom, but it is wired on both sides for, you know, cape posability. Here is a nice close-up view of the Huntress's smiling face sculpt. I think I like this one the best, actually. Seeing it this close actually brings out the fact that the paint really hasn't completely gone where it's supposed to. It's forgivable, these are mass-produced, and it's really hard to get the paint exactly everywhere. Removing her face plates is pretty easy. You just kind of pull on the side and it pops off, and you're left with that scary, hideous hole in her head. And then we just pop on the new faceplate, and here we have, up close, the more serious Huntress face sculpt. And, you know, it looks pretty much like the last one, except for she's not smirking. So if you want a more straight-faced Huntress posed on your shelf, you might be looking for something more like this. And then finally, this face sculpt is actually very different than the previous two, because the mask doesn't actually go up on the sides like the previous two did. That's because I believe this faceplate is actually for the Platinum Edition more than anything else. That's the kind of mask that she wore back then. And as for the quality, it's pretty much comparable to the last two. Here is a closer look at her trading card here at the front. We can spy some more of those details. And on the back, we have a short data file bio, which you should feel free to pause to read if you'd like to. I also want to take a quick little look at her crossbow accessory here. It looks like a crossbow. You got the arrow on the top, you got the handle right here. It is a little bit chunky as far as the top goes, where you can see the top of the bow with the pulleys. There is no string. It would be kind of cool if there was some kind of a string going across here. Even a plastic one would have been cool, but nonetheless, here is her crossbow. Now I'm just quickly going to run through her articulation here, just because some of you may not have seen the previous Catwoman figure reviewed. And I'm going to start with the legs and tell you that this right here, the amount of this motion is quite abysmal. It's on that McFarlane groin, and it does get a considerable amount of articulation the other ways. You just don't get that approximation of a thigh cut. You have crunchy knees that do really, really well as the sculpted rounded hinge that is also a pivot, and you also have the toe articulation with this Huntress figure. You've got articulation right here in the waist as well as in the torso, and both of those actually make for a very good range of motion for the Huntress. You don't really want to turn the top one all too much, just because then you end up breaking that line and it looks weird. So you just want to be mindful of that when you're posing her. Unless you don't care, then go ahead, be my guest. You've also got the shoulders here that are on that typical rounded hinge, and they have the socket there. These shoulder pads are definitely getting in the way of how much you can get her into some sort of a reasonable T. She's got the bicep swivel right here, in her arm, as well as double jointed elbows and the rounded peg hinge right here in the wrist. That's what she's got there. And then you've also got her head, which, you know, don't expect much because you're not going to get much on account of that big blop of hair that she has that's sticking up right there. So now at the end of this video, what do I think of all three of these figures? The Dark Knight Returns Battle Damaged Batman, the Red Hood, and the New 52 Huntress figure? I think all in all, I like them very much. The Red Hood is my favorite, along with the Huntress following a close second. The big chunky Batman is still actually pretty cool. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm going to perform a swap with the blue parts onto the other Batman's body just so I can have a blue and gray version of this Batman. As is, I still think it looks pretty cool. So coming to the other end of this video, I find myself feeling like, yeah, I'm glad that I managed to get my hands on these, and if you're looking for them, keep your eyes out because they're hitting store shelves as we speak. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it so much, and I will see you folks with the next one. Have a DC day, everybody, and take care.